Good evening and welcome to the inaugural installment of our new pregame show, SSN Gameday. I'm your host, Adam Hipsky, joined alongside my analysts, Trestyn Mayberry and Gerig. And on SSN Gameday, we will be happy to bring you coverage from all the previous week's games all around the state of Indiana and take a look into tonight's games. We'll start last week, week 1. Tons of good games. You have Westfield, New Pal, HSC Lawrence Central, Brownsburg, Ben Davis, and then on the other side of town, Fishers, North Central, among others. We'll get it started with Westfield, New Palestine. Obviously, kind of a surprise there. Westfield 6A, state runner-ups from a year ago. New Palestine, a 4A team. Nothing against New Palestine, but I don't think anyone was expecting what was coming there last Friday.
No, not at all. We saw last year that obviously Westfield made it to state, so expectations are still high coming off of a 2-time state runner-up. And losing Popeye Williams and losing Micah Hauser is just the biggest downfall for them, I think.
Yeah, obviously New Palestine just kind of dominated up front for this one. 42-28 was your final there. You talked about Westfield being the defending 6A state runner-up. Now let's go to the other side of that game. Center Grove, defending 6A state champions, back-to-back. They opened up their season with a 17-8 win against Warren. Thoughts on that game, fellas?
I think that game was interesting too. You know, both teams played it was a very defensive game. I think the score was 17-8. Warren only had 8 points, which is kind of surprising because I thought their offense would be a lot better than, what I saw. But then again, credit to the Center Grove defense who really, took that next step and leveled up to where they are now and ended up beating Warren.
We'll stay in the MIC one last time. Carmel hosting 6A semi-state in the state of Kentucky. Trinity took an opening week loss, 17-7, but still kind of a lot still to be learned from Carmel.
Yeah, it's hard to look at those games, when teams play out of state because you don't quite know how states compare and whatnot. So when you put Carmel in the rankings I believe they're at 4. Mm-hmm. When you put them at 4, it's kind of hard for people to tell what their talent actually is because those out of state, you don't know how they compare. So I think Carmel still has a lot of bright spots, and I think they're going to be an amazing team this year. But it's just about how far they come through the season, and this week will test them. Yeah.
We'll move conferences, but we'll also stay in the MIC. You have Brownsburg, Ben Davis, a top 10 matchup in week 1. Brownsburg looked the part early. We'll learn more about them tonight, but so far, week 1, what was your thought on their win against Ben Davis?
I thought Brownsburg had a really good showing, especially with a Ben Davis team that is hungry from last year. You just see that the offense is already clicking day 1, and that is nothing to complain about, obviously. And then after losing some seniors to the defense, they come back, reload with underclassmen, and ready. But Ben Davis is also a team you can't sleep on as their defense is one of the best in the state, and I think they're going to do big things this year.
We talked about the MIC. We talked about Brownsburg. We're going to shift it to Brownsburg's conference. The HCC, we'll start with Fishers North Central. Fishers coming off, it was not their year last year at all. You see Kurt Funk start to build the pieces, but man, they had an unbelievable week 1 showing. Dominates North Central. Thoughts on maybe their upcoming season? I mean, obviously we have that Mudsock matchup week 4, but right now they've still got 3 weeks ahead of them. But Fishers looks it so far.
Yeah, for sure. You have Carson Dunn, obviously, one of the best running backs in the state, arguably. Right behind that, you have Kobe Martin. He's also a really underrated back for them. And then that offense is really what is going to hold the Tigers up this year, I think, especially with the quarterback play. You're going to have a lot of that. And then the defense is going to have to come up big late in the season when conference play comes up.
On the other side of town, HSC Lawrence Central, another opening week top 10 matchup. We had a plethora of those in week 1, something that you're not used to seeing. And then we'll get into tonight's games. Unbelievable early season schedule in Indiana high school football. But HSC Lawrence Central, a defensive battle. I don't really know what we were expecting to see. I think there was a lot of question marks on both sides of the ball, but I think some of them were answered What were your guys' thoughts on HSC Lawrence Central?
That game was extremely interesting to me just because, I and others probably expected HSC to kind of run away with it. But with that defense of Lawrence Central probably being one of the best in the state, we'll see how they play throughout the season. But Joshua Mickens going to LSU, obviously they have him, and they have a couple other key pieces to that defense that really stood out to me. And, it'll be interesting to see what HSC's offense does this week because they didn't play the best. They only had 10 offensive points. One came from a safety, or two came from a safety. So it'll be interesting to see what both teams. But it was a very heavy defensive game.
Yep. Trestyn.
I really liked what I saw from the defense day one. You get out there and you show what you're capable of doing, and they held them to 7 points. Can't complain about that. And then you go to the offensive side. That's where I think the Royals are lacking big time this year. You have the O-line, which everyone from last season is gone and graduated. So that leaves a huge key piece for the Royals. But for LC, their defense is one of the top in the state, and you can't complain about that if you're a Bears fan. The offense obviously is young, but with the season going on, they're going to develop and they're going to be strong together, and I think they could do some big things this year, be an underrated team.
Yep, especially in that mid-conference that seems to be pretty wide open.
Yeah.
Especially with Center Grove losing so many pieces. Carmel obviously looks vulnerable early. And that'll do it for this week's preview. We're going to send it to Boothby's board with our analyst, Alex Boothby, and we'll be back.
Hello, I'm Alex Boothby, and welcome to Boothby's board. I'm a football player here at HSC, and here's my takes on what I think are the top 3 games in the state this week. First off, Carmel at Center Grove. Center Grove has been an extremely good football team these past 2 years. Back-to-back state champions with a winning culture. However, losing a lot of pieces, they do seem to be on the struggle bus heading into this year with a tight game against Warren Central last week. Carmel, on the other hand, returning a lot of players, especially on defense. Will Helt and many other stars cast that defense with plenty of D1 prospects. So I see Carmel in this game winning by at least a touchdown. Carmel -7 against Center Grove. Center Grove, I think they'll get it rolling later this year, but with still a lot of question marks, especially on the offensive side, I see Carmel dominating this game. Cathedral at Brownsburg. Cathedral moving up to 6A this year after being 5A state champion last year. Star-studded cast with Kendrick Gilbert heading the D-line. Brownsburg, on the other hand, played very well last week against Ben Davis, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I'm very excited for this matchup. We have a really good offense versus a very good defense. However, I think Cathedral, who also has a really good offense in addition to their defense, will win out this game this week. I have Cathedral -3. Moving on, Lawrence Central at Westfield. Here's my hot take. I think this is one of the most impactful games this week in Indiana football. Lawrence Central, who has a very good defense with Joshua Mickens on the D-line going to LSU. Westfield was on the struggle bus last week against New Palestine, losing by a wide margin, 42-28. However, Westfield has been in the state championship game the past 2 years and is notorious in the HCC and 6A overall for being one of the more dominant football teams. However, losing a couple pieces both on offense and defense, and Popeye Williams, Maximus Webster, and Micah Hauser, they definitely have some pieces that they need to fill on the defensive side of the ball, and you saw those weaknesses last week against New Pal. However, Lawrence Central, again, their offense showed some flashes last week against us at LC, but their defense and as a whole can really be a dominant defense this year. So I honestly see Lawrence Central winning this game, moving Westfield to 0-2 by exploiting some of the weaknesses that they have on offense. That's it here at Boothby's board. Back to Adam at the desk.
And we're back here on the set of SSN Gameday. We broke down week 1, and now we're on to week 2. Obviously, the main storylines here, kind of a college football playoff type week. You have number 1 Center Grove with number 1 Carmel and number 2 Cathedral playing number 3 Brownsburg. Not something that you're used to seeing in high school football, especially the way it lines up in the same week. Okay, so 2, you have Carmel Center Grove that are in conference, both in the MIC, and then you have Cathedral Brownsburg out of conference. So kind of, a rarity that you see here in high school football. We're going to start with Carmel Center Grove, top 4 matchup, Copper Kettle game at Center Grove. What do you guys think about this one?
I think this is going to be an offensive game. I think both offenses are extremely good, but then Carmel's defense is just outstanding. They're returning most of their defense from last year. And I just think both teams have a really good shot to win this. It'll be interesting to see who comes out on top.
For sure. Carmel also has some really good defensive pieces, as you said. Their wide receiver core is amazing. Can't go wrong with that. But, you have Center Grove, who's coming off of 2 state titles and 25 straight wins. So it's going to be hard for the Greyhounds to snap that streak.
Yeah, I think like you guys mentioned, the main thing, Carmel struggled to get the offense going right now. They're running a 2-quarterback system, splitting drives. We'll see how that works out for them. Center Grove still has a lot of pieces that they have to fill that graduated from the year prior. They opened up the season with a win against Warren, but, you never know. I could see this going either way. We'll move in to the other top 4 matchup, Cathedral Brownsburg. Cathedral, their first year in 6A, coming off 2 5A state championships. Okay, now they're in the big dogs. Okay, they've got Brownsburg tonight. Brownsburg looks the part early. Okay, but this is definitely going to be their toughest test for both sides this season.
Yeah, no. Cathedral's defense, obviously. You have Kendrick Gilbert on the D-line, one of the best players arguably in the state. And then you have Brownsburg's offense, whose quarterback last week had one of the best games of the week, beating Ben Davis last second, thrown for a touchdown. So it's going to be a back-and-forth game, obviously, with Brownsburg's offense going against Cathedral's defense. It's going to be a really good one.
Yeah, you have a lot of, college prospects in this game. As you mentioned, Kendrick Gilbert, Leighton Jones on the offensive line, who's going to Iowa. So that's going to be an interesting matchup between, how they line those two up, if they line them up together, or what happens with Brownsburg's offense and how they, try to contain Gilbert. But I think it'll be super interesting to see, offense versus defense. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, Cathedral has looked pretty unstoppable the last 2 seasons, with the exception of playing Center Grove. Center Grove, obviously, in the upper echelon of 6A football, and now they have to be introduced to that tonight against Brownsburg. So we'll see what Cathedral does with the test. They haven't been tested like this early on in the last couple seasons. So obviously, I think this is going to be something that both these teams aren't really used to. Brownsburg taking a tough game this early in the season. Not only won, but Ben Davis wasn't easy last week. So, you're playing back-to-back. Tough ways to get your season started, especially with the HCC being a little down this year. These games are going to be very valuable for Brownsburg, especially to build that confidence when you come state time and you're making that run. Brownsburg, Cathedral, Center Grove, Carmel definitely headlined the week. But we talk about 2 teams that obviously their seasons did not get started the way you wanted to. Westfield and Lawrence Central. Westfield, kind of a surprise. Lawrence Central, not so much of a surprise, but obviously both teams want to get in the win column. I'm not saying desperation time yet, but obviously 0-1, you want to build some momentum heading into conference play. What do you guys think about Westfield, Lawrence Central tonight?
I think it's going to be an interesting game again. We have a great slate of, Friday night lights. But Westfield and Lawrence Central is just going to be a very competitive, very fun atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Both teams looking to get some revenge after, tough losses last week. And I think it'll just be a really fun atmosphere, really fun just game in general.
Yeah, and going off of that, you have LC's defense, what we saw last week against HSC, that is just ready to hit. And then you have Westfield's offense, which is lost some pieces but keeping some at the same time. So having those both on a 0-1 game, needing a win, that's going to be a huge game for both teams.
Moving on. We talked about Carmel Trinity last week, another game featuring an out-of-state opponent. Warren Central coming off the loss against Center Grove. Host Detroit King, headlined by 5-star quarterback committed to Oregon, Dante Moore. Obviously, this one's going to be hard to balance because you never know the out-of-state. But Detroit King has talent. They defeated Carmel defeated them last year. So obviously an interesting one here tonight. Any takeaways that you guys think, especially when you're looking at a game like this where it features an out-of-state opponent?
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned, Dante Moore. I've seen a lot about Dante Moore. He's had a lot of just amazing games in high school, and to see him here in Indy, like you said last year, he was at Carmel. To see him this year, though, at Warren, it's going to be really cool, and see him go against that Warren defense, which is usually all over the place. So,
yeah, I think this will be a fun game as well. I think my key to the game is Warren's defense is going to have to come up big, obviously, because you have a quarterback going to Oregon, and, that's a lot of times I don't really hear about that, but especially when it's this close to Indiana and when he's coming here and playing Warren, Warren's defense is going to have to come up and end up, it'll be hopefully beat them for the culture of Indiana football.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you said, tough test tonight for Warren Central, regardless of who's on the offensive side of the ball. It's going to be hard to stop a 5-star quarterback. Moving on, Fishers opened up the season with a 34-0 win. Pike, obviously a struggling program the last couple of years. Do you guys look to see Fishers get back on top once again this week and open up their season 2-0?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think Fishers is going to, dominate the run game in this one just because that's what they did last week, and I think they're going to carry that momentum. As you mentioned earlier, Carson Dunn and Kobe Martin, who are both outstanding running backs. And I just think Fishers is going to keep it on the ground, and that's, what they need to do for this game and the rest of the season.
Moving on, HSE versus North Central tonight. North Central obviously took the Week 1 domination to Fishers. HSE coming off the 12-7 win against Lawrence Central. We won't make any picks here, but right now we're going to talk about keys to the game, points of emphasis tonight.
So, big thing for HSC this week is offensive line. I think if HSC needs to succeed this week, their offensive line needs to step up, get that run game going, which they usually get, and just have a great offensive game against NC.
Yeah, I think I want to see running backs get more involved this week. Last week I didn't really see that what Jalen Alexander and what Eli Brantman could do. Obviously, Brendan Baker got hurt last week, and that's a tough loss as Brendan was a great running back. But I think these two running backs can still get it done, and it's just a matter of how they do it and, when they start to click.
Yep, absolutely. We've given you the breakdown for tonight. Without further ado, let's get into some game picks for tonight. We'll end with kind of the main games of the week, but we'll start with Fishers and Pike. Obviously, we opened up. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but Fishers, Pike, we'll give your picks. We'll start with Trestyn.
I like Fishers in this one. Obviously, last week we saw they won 34-0. I think they go out and their offense wins in dominant fashion again.
Yeah, I agree. I like Fishers just because their run game, I think, is going to be very dominant.
Yeah, and something that we didn't talk about, obviously their run game looked great last week, but not enough on their defense. They held North Central to 0 points, shutout, also a pick 6 by Grady Stanley in that one. I think the Fishers defense plays a big part in it tonight. I think they hold them to under 7 points, and I've got Fishers in this one. King at Warren. Obviously Dante Moore, the main storyline in this one. What do we have tonight?
I'm going to take King on this one. I just don't think Warren's defense can stand up to Dante's all-out athleticism, and I think he just goes out and torches the Warren defense tonight.
I think it'll be a closer game than most people expect, but I'm going to go with King too, just for the same reasons.
I'm going to agree. Obviously, it's Indiana football. I think Warren Central is going to hang in there tight early on, but I think Dante Moore, at the end of the day, I think quarterback play is really going to matter in the fourth quarter. I'm going to take King in this one. Westfield, Lawrence Central, both teams, I think this game's going to be pretty close. Westfield wants a win. Lawrence Central wants a win. Who's going to come out with it tonight?
So I have Lawrence Central in this one. I really liked what they came out with last week, only losing 5 to HSC, Can't go wrong with that one. If the offense plays to the levels they did last week and even better, I think they can go into Westfield and get a huge win.
I don't agree with that. I think Westfield's going to win this one just solely based on, what Lawrence Central's offense showed me last week is not enough to beat the Shamrocks.
I think the key tonight is, can Lawrence Central's offense get going against Westfield's defense? I think HSE and Westfield both had two of the top defenses in the state last year. Obviously, we talked about Westfield losing Popeye Williams, losing Micah Hauser. So you have a couple pieces to fill, but they still have Dylan Thieneman. Westfield's going to be really good tonight. So I think that's the key, is if we see Lawrence Central's offense get going, I think they're going to have it. But right now, before we see the game tonight, I'm going to have to go with Westfield tonight. I think that they're just the more experienced team, and I think that they're going to return more talent, and I think they're going to end up coming out with it tonight. We're going to dig deep into the top four matchups now. We'll start with Center Grove Carmel, the rivalry game. Center Grove 1-0, Carmel 0-1. Can Carmel come out with a win, or does Center Grove move to 2-0?
So I have Center Grove keeping the streak alive. I don't think Carmel can get it done tonight. I think Center Grove is just that much better of a team. You can't go wrong with them being dominant and two-time state champs.
Yep.
So I'm going to go with the opposite. I think Carmel's going to win this game. And I just think their defense is going to stand up to the test, and I really do think that Carmel's going to snap that streak and win this game.
Wow.
I'm going to go with Center Grove tonight, but I'm going to say this. I think that if these two teams see each other later in the season, in the postseason, I'm going to take Carmel. I'm going to tell you why, because Carmel right now is running that two-quarterback system. I don't think they have it fully figured out on the offensive end. I think once they find their identity going forward with their quarterback, I think that's going to tell a lot more about this team. But right now, I think there's too many question marks around Carmel, only scoring 7 points, and that was on a deep pass in week 1. So I'm going to go with Center Grove here, but not to discredit Carmel at all, because I think they're a great team. I just think right now they have too many question marks, but I think they're going to get that figured out. And I think once they get that figured out, I think Carmel's going to be a tough out, especially once we get to November.
Yeah.
Moving to the other top four matchup, you've got Cathedral and Brownsburg. Cathedral, we talked about them, 5A state champions back-to-back. Now they're back to 6A. Brownsburg looks good early. Who's got it tonight?
I really like Brownsburg, but Cathedral is one of, if not the best team in the state. That defense is incredible. And having to go against Brownsburg's offense, I don't think Brownsburg's offense has enough for Cathedral's defense.
Yeah, I agree. I like Cathedral in this game just because, I just think they're too much of a powerhouse. Even though they just moved to 6A, I still think they should have been in 6A.
Cathedral opened with a dominant win against Lafayette Jeff. Now, obviously, this is a much tougher opponent, but I think Cathedral's really talented, and I think right now what we'll see tonight is really, can Cathedral hang with the big dogs? I think they can. I'm going to go with Cathedral here in this one. I'm going to have Cathedral and Center Grove winning those, Cathedral and Center Grove winning those two big matchups. HSE North Central. Davis is on the call. He won't make a pick, but we'll start with Trestyn on this one. HSE North Central tonight, the game of the week.
We saw North Central last week, a lackluster year, putting up 0 points against Fishers. So coming into HSE, I don't think our offense will do anything against our defense. So I'm going to go HSE on this one.
I think the main thing tonight is, can the offense get rolling? And I think that they can, but I think it's really important for them to get going, especially going forward. You have Avon next week. That's kind of another momentum-building game. But then week 4, you have Mudsock, and you have to make sure the offense has to have confidence going into that one. So I think this one's important. I think they're going to have the win. I don't think they need their best stuff tonight, but I do still think that they need to get that offense rolling. Obviously, defense looked good week 1, but I think that offense needs to get going. I'm going to take HSE. I think the offense maybe gets a little bit more going on the ground game, but I still think they kind of struggle. I'm going to go HSE 28-7.
Okay.
And that'll do it for our first ever episode of SSN Gameday. For your host, I'm Adam Hipsky, along with Trestyn Mayberry and Gerig, and our other analyst, Alex Boothby. We appreciate you tuning in. Enjoy the game tonight.